we had mentioned that God has no needs. So why does God want us to do and behave in a certain way, to be righteous and not evil? Why does God want us to serve Him? Why does God want us to bring sacrifices if God has no needs? One, to be worthy of reward, one has to be a self-earner. As we can explain, this is very important. Precept and concept. God exists independent of anything. God's existence is not dependent or contingent on anything other than Himself. God pre-exists existence, as we say. God was, God is in the future. We say God is the first, God is the last. In the Zohar, which is the basis for all Kabbalistic understanding, refers to God as Ein Sof. There's no end. There's no beginning. God is infinite. But man has to be worthy of reward. How does one become worthy? You become worthy by making the right choice. If you're worthy, you're deserving of reward. What is the reward? The reward is to have a relationship with a being who is the ultimate, who's the absolute, in a context which is not fathomable. It's unfathomable, unfathomed. Goodness, which is God Himself. But you have to create that worthiness through one's own choice. Anything which is endowed upon a person, it's unrelated to the person himself. If a person is born with phenomenal genius, the genius has nothing to do with himself. It cannot be attributed to himself. He's fortunate that he has this endowment of genius. A person is talented. Unless he develops and applies his intellect and that talent, whatever happens is unrelated to himself. If a person is able, due to his intellectual capacity, grasp concepts which most people cannot, with relative ease, the quickness of that grasp cannot be accredited to himself, because this is due to his endowment of intellect, exceptional, unusual intellect. You're only accredited with something that it came about only due to your own application and your degree of application. For instance, if one is compelled to violate the law where he has no choice, truly against one's will, according to Jewish law, one is not held accountable for that action. Why is that? Because the only reason why that act was perpetrated was because of the external force, unrelated to the person himself. So the action is not attributed to the person himself, but rather to the external force. For instance, according to Torah law, the Torah tells us you must live by my Torah, inferring not to die for it. If a person is deathly ill and must seek medical attention on the Sabbath, which is known as the Shabbos, one is obligated to violate the Sabbath, to seek medical attention. If one must eat food that does not conform with dietary laws, because otherwise he will die or become deathly ill, one must and is obligated to eat that food, because God says you must live by my Torah and not die for it. However, the three cardinal sins, which are the exception: murder. If a person says to an individual, either you kill or you will be killed, a Jew is not permitted to kill, take another life to save his own life. If a Jew is told, either you do an idolatrous act or you will be killed, you must give your life. You're not permitted to bow to the idol or to do the ritual of idolatry, and you must die. This is referred to as sanctify God's name by giving your life. If one is told, commit an incestuous act or an adulterous act, or you will be killed, God says you must sanctify my name in these three areas and die and not transgress. If one does violate, it's considered a desecration of God's name. So one is obligated to give his life to sanctify God's name, but if one does not, he's desecrating God's name. What is the law if a person chose to live and to commit murder due to his life being threatened? Or he did the idolatrous act due to his life being threatened? Or he did the incestuous act or the adulterous act due to his life being threatened? And he was forewarned. Is he liable for the death penalty? The answer is no, he's not. Why? Because since the act, whether it's murder, whether it's idolatry, whether it's incest, whether it's adultery, the act only came about due to an external force compelling him, coercing him, forcing him to do the act itself. Did he violate the law of desecrating God's name? Yes. But one is not subject to the death penalty if one desecrates God's name. His obligation was to sanctify God's name. So we see here clearly that if one does an action and the action is not attributed to himself but to an external force, it does not identify with the person himself. Identically, if God would have created a being who naturally does good, the goodness which is done is unrelated to the person. The person is compelled to act and do only good. If a person is created to do evil and he has no choice but to do evil and perpetrate evil, the person is not culpable or liable for any of his actions. Because again, it wasn't his own volition. It's not due to his own volition that the act was done, but rather, in very clear terms, he was forced to behave in that manner. He had no choice to act differently. Therefore, the action is not attributed to himself. Therefore, God created a being, the human being, free choice. The good is done because man chose to do the good. The evil is perpetrated, God forbid, because man chose to do the evil. It's unrelated to anything other than himself. There's nothing external. Therefore, the person is in the balance. Everything is evaluated. What was your intent? How did it come about? Was it inadvertent? Was it deliberate? Was it defiant? When you did the right thing, was it with an ulterior motive? Not for the sake of God. Was it for the sake of God? Was it with reverence? Was it with humility? Was it with self-negation? All this comes into play because every one of these nuances relating to each one of the issues is fully within man's ability to bring about.